nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell here with my co-host Glenn Martin. Really excited to get into what all of you have on your mind this weekend, this long Labor Day weekend, which is your fantasy draft. I know that's the big event for us this weekend. We're really excited about it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Ravens roster and the fantasy outlook based on your Ravens. So I'm going to dish this one right over to Glenn, and we'll kind of get started.
All right, so I guess we'll start right at the top. I mean, where else to start other than the quarterback, the head of the snake, as they say. So obviously Lamar Jackson is going to be in the elite of all quarterbacks. There's a few that seem to be the outliers that consistently score high points and also protect the ball because, as we know, certainly in our league, turnovers are a little bit more costly than even in normal leagues. And they're costly in normal leagues. So you want to stick to a few guys that are kind of separating themselves from the rest. And of course, Lamar Jackson is one of those guys. We're basically pulling our rankings from a multitude of different sources, as well as using the knowledge that we've heard from training camp and expectations we have ourselves on these players to kind of get the rankings, if you will, where we have them. To me, I have Lamar Jackson is the number one rated quarterback in the league, just above Pat Mahomes, just barely edging him out. And I think it's pretty obvious why I have him there, and it's because he brings you the dual threat. I mean, he brings you in the air. He was the league leader in passing touchdowns last year, as well as broke the rushing record. So when you got a guy who can hurt you through the air and on the ground, I mean, it only makes sense, especially when you consider most leagues have it to where rushing yards value more than passing yards. So if you have a quarterback that can get both, that's pretty awesome. And also he brings value as for getting rushing touchdowns as well as passing touchdowns. So I have Lamar Jackson as the number one overall quarterback, our number one overall player as Ravens. And I would take him as high as the second round, but very early. Now, some people are going to say put him in the first round. If it's a non-PPR league, definitely he's a first-round pick, in my opinion. No doubt about it. In PPR, if you took him in the first round, I wouldn't be mad at you one bit. But for me, I would say it might be a little bit early in the first round in a PPR league.
Yeah, so Ravens fans, I think the key is don't get emotional. If you're wanting to win your fantasy, don't get emotional and use that early pick on Lamar as much as it would be fun to, of course, and it's fun when you're rooting for your favorite player, your favorite team, and they're on your fantasy team. Our suggestion would be, in order to have success, try and stay patient. Now, Glenn, if I remember last year, you used your first-round pick on a quarterback, right? You went Pat Mahomes. You were the first one to take a quarterback off the board.
Yeah.
Now, do you?
I had a late pick though. I was picking at near the very end of the first round. And I looked at it like I could get the best at that position at that point. Actually, Lamar was gone at that point. If you remember, my older brother took him a couple picks before. So I felt like I had to get the best. But anyway, I don't want to sit here and talk about my last year's fantasy team.
I just want to ask one thing. Based on that experience, would you recommend the same thing that I suggested, where it's worth it to wait, even if you have a top-tier talent like that, who would be easy to justify taking the first round? It wouldn't be crazy, right? But if you could do it again, would it make sense to wait a little bit later?
Well, it might make sense, yeah. I mean, I think you're probably – I'd have to see the list in front of me again, but I remember obviously the top main name running backs were gone, and then Michael Thomas was gone, Julio Jones was gone at that point. So I think it came down to I could pick the sixth best running back, the number one tight end, or in my mind the number one quarterback last year, which was Pat Mahomes. So that's why I went that direction. But, yeah, I would say – and it's funny because it ended up being in most PPR leagues that Lamar Jackson, I think, was the number 2 overall scorer in the league behind McCaffrey last year. And so when people might say, well, how can he not be a first-round pick? And like I said, if you took him in the first round, I'm not going to say it was a bad pick.
Right.
But I think most teams and most people are expecting Lamar's numbers to maybe go down a little bit, even if he shows improvement as a player and he shows that he's a better player, his numbers might not be as gaudy because he had an insane season last year. I mean, it was ridiculous to have 36 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 1,200 rushing yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns. I mean, that's just insane. So I think if you took him, that means you expect him to have a great year, and I do too. But in a PPR league, I'd probably. Oh man, it's hard to say, man, because I just think he's going to be so good. It's a tough call. I would say I'd rank him like 12th. I'm going to say because I'm in a 12-man league. So
there you go. I think that's a safe place. All right, fair enough. So what we're doing is let's move on. You know, obviously Lamar's our top ranked fantasy player as far as the Ravens go. So let's kind of move down that list. So we're taking based on the resources that we use to rank these guys. Our next ranked guy. My next ranked guy is Mark Andrews. Is that the guy you have?
Absolutely, yep.
So in a lot of leagues, you know, he's ranked in the 40s. I know that you're really big on him projecting 12 touchdowns or so. You feeling good about that? I think that he will have, just like last year, if I'm not mistaken, he led the tight ends in touchdowns. I don't know if he will in yards and all those things based on the fact that he's probably not going to get as many attempts as other guys. But I agree with you. Based on the fact that in the red zone, it's kind of like a pick your poison thing with the defense. You can only do so much because Lamar's a runner. So I think, you know, he's absolutely more than worthy of a fourth, maybe third round grade, depending on how your board falls and when the run on tight ends, you know, begins. But I think taking Mark Andrews early is definitely something that's a great investment. What's your take?
Well, I agree with you in the sense that I don't think he's going to be a high catch, and he might not even be in the league leaders in yards. But I would not be shocked at all to see him lead the league as far as tight ends and touchdowns. I mean, he might be our only reliable red zone threat through the air, and I don't expect that to change. He's a favorite target for Lamar. He's our biggest target for Lamar, and yeah, he just seems like they just seem to have this incredible connection. So I don't see there's any reason why he shouldn't be a very high scoring player. Now, tight ends don't get as much love as running backs and wide receivers. So, yeah, like he said, he's rated mostly in the 40s, maybe high 30s, depending on which rankings you look at. But he is the third overall tight end behind Kittle and Kelsey, which is rare company to be up there with those guys. Yeah. When you look at what they just got paid, what they obviously mean to their team, they're considered to be much more than your average tight end. They're their number one target on their team. Kelsey might – I mean, I'm not sure who ends up with the more total catches, Kelsey or Hill. Hill might end up beating him in yards, but I would venture that Kelsey might end up with more catches and more touchdowns. So if Andrews is in their company, they obviously think he's going to have a heck of a season. I would say – let's see, the projections that I'm looking at for Mark Andrews have him at 70 catches for just under 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think that could be accurate. I think his touchdowns are low here. I think he's going to be in the double digits, no doubt. He was at 10 last year. I don't see any reason why he can't get to 11 or 12 this year. So so where did you say you would take him? Where was your
third, fourth round, depending on how your board falls? And really quickly before you answer that question, the other thing that I'll add to that is this is the way that I see it in my mind. I'm sure that you'll agree with this. Anytime we get in the red zone, Mark is going to get a look where at least, you know, so say we have 4 plays, it's first and goal. We're in the red zone.
Yeah.
He's going to get 1 look, right, per trip to the red zone, at least 1. And I think
by look,
conservative. Yeah,
I don't think you mean, when you say look, you don't mean target, like he's guaranteed a target, but he's getting a play where he's the number 1 option drawn up, or at least number 1 or 2 option. Absolutely.
Right. If they take that away, that's one thing, but he's going to get an opportunity to beat his man and be open and have Lamar throwing the ball where he'll be the number 1 option every time we're in the red zone at least once.
Absolutely. And why not? I mean,
absolutely.
He's our biggest target. He can high point a ball, so absolutely. And a lot of those targets are going to come off play action where, the defense might be selling out to worry about the run, and he could be running free. So, yeah, I think a third-round pick would be the ceiling for him. Right. But right in the 4th round would probably be the best bet, and you'd be pretty happy if you got Mark Andrews. Yeah.
Man, I'm excited. Do
you expect him to get more because of the absence of Hayden Hurst?
More target, like just –
more opportunity.
Yeah, I don't see. I think 70 is a good number. The reason that I don't see his overall I think that the touchdowns will go up. But I don't think the yards are going to be 1,000. I think they'll be about the same. Only because I think Hollywood's going to have more of an impact on this offense. I think Boykin's progression. I think the fact that J.K.'s another receiving threat. And even something goofy like Ricard's progression, now that he's only an offensive player, all those things matter when you're talking about Mark's production, right?
Yeah.
Because they all
And
chip
also,
away.
sometimes, a lot of times, like you said, we know that the defense is gonna want to take Andrews away. So a lot of
Right.
times they could probably use him as a decoy,
Right.
to take the coverage his way and set somebody else up for a good opportunity. So, yeah, I think he's gonna have a good year, but yeah, I mean, there's really nothing else to say. He's gonna have a heck of a year.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. The next one that I'm really excited to talk about here is I mentioned him, Hollywood Brown. There's a little bit of discrepancy, I feel like, on the places that I've seen him. Whether that's ESPN or other places. There's a little bit of a difference. Mark Andrews seemed to be and Lamar seemed to be pretty consistent. But Hollywood, I think, is going to be really interesting. In a list that I saw, he's ranked below Will Fuller. I don't agree with that. Based on availability, but I think Hollywood. What are his outlook? Let's see.
Right now, they're giving him a projection of 65 catches for just under 850 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think the touchdowns are accurate there. I think the receptions. I think because they give that range. Oh, I see, receptions to targets. I think it's going to be closer to 80 receptions, and I think he's going to break 1,000 yards. So I think that's a little conservative in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean they're rating his targets as identical as last year. Last year he had 98. He had I'm sorry. Oh, I'm looking at Andrews. I'm sorry. Andrews had 98 targets. So they're giving him Andrews' target load going into this season is what they're expecting. And that would be a significant increase because they're talking about almost 30 more targets than he got last year, which I think we all agree that Hollywood's going to be much more part of this offense now that he's healthy and now that he's in better physical shape to withstand an NFL season. I think Marquise is going to put up big numbers, and I think the reason is because I think we're going to finally see that the yak yards that we were hoping for when he came out of college. Yep. I think they're going to get him the ball more towards more at the line of scrimmage than we saw last year, as well as keep running them down the field. Because what have we seen from Lamar Jackson all training camp? It's been the commitment to that deep ball. I mean, we've seen way more deep balls being thrown this training camp than we had last season. And I think that is that commitment to take their shots, to back the defense up, to open it up underneath for other guys. And Marquise is the perfect guy to do that for us. So, I think he's going to have a heck of a season. I would say those touchdowns are a little bit low. I think he's going to get around 8 touchdowns. But I think he'll get 1,000 yards this year coming up. So,
yeah,
while I think PFF is slightly low. I understand why they have him where they do because this offense is a run-first offense. But I think having him as the 52nd wide receiver,
Yeah, I agree with you there. And the other thing you got to think about, just like you mentioned, he's lightning in a bottle. So it only takes, we saw his very first game in history who had his first 2 receptions went for touchdowns.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it only takes 2-3 receptions and he's got two TDs.
No, I think you're right. I think he's got that Ty Hill factor that Ty Hill might have 0 points at halftime and he might have 30 at the end of the game because he caught 2 bombs in the second half. And that's what you get from players like that. You get that big play threat. And I know in certain leagues there's bonuses for big plays. So that gets added into their fantasy projections and outlooks. I think that he's going to have a heck of a year. I mean, to me, I think he's Where do you? Let me ask you this: Where would you take him? Where would you feel confident and comfortable taking Marquise?
What round?
Yeah.
I mean,
is he behind? Is he? Because Andrews, we said Andrews was 3 to 4. To me, he's just barely behind Andrews because of the red zone threat that Andrews is.
Right.
But very close. I'd say 4th, 5th.
Yeah. No, I agree. I feel comfortable in the 4th and the 5th. Yeah, I mean, absolutely in the 5th if he's still there.
In a 12-man league?
Yeah, I say you grab him, and you walk away from that one happy.
But, I mean, I wouldn't even be mad if somebody took him in the 3rd. People I think, are really underestimating the amount that they're going to use him in this offense. And if you want to take him in the 3rd round over a guy like a Juju Smith-Schuster, over maybe an A.J. Brown from the Tennessee Titans, I wouldn't be mad about that at all. I would probably feel most comfortable in the 4th, but if you took him in the 3rd, I think he'd be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I want to do here, I think we might touch on some other receivers if they're worth talking about, but I want to talk about this group of running backs here because there's a lot of conversation about how early Dobbins is going to take on the role as the number 1 back, the bell cow, if you will, how him and Mark are going to split times, how Gus is going to be a factor. Because look, guys, at the end of the day, Gus is such a wild card, I feel like, right? Like, I'm obviously not going to spend an early round pick on him, but he's such a wild card because one injury, and we're talking about a guy that's, almost had 1,000 yards in his first 7 games in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
Last year, he was the quietest 700-plus yards in the history of the NFL.
No
right?
doubt. No
So
doubt.
where do you – let's start with Mark Ingram.
Well, hold on. Before we move on from Gus, because I think
okay.
we're going to spend a lot more time on the other guys.
Okay.
Because what I would say for people who want Gus, it would not be a bad idea at all to take him in the late rounds, because what you're looking for in the late rounds is guys that could impact you either in the second half of the season or obviously handcuffs for good running backs in good running systems that could get hurt. So backups for good running backs in good systems. No better than Gus Edwards. I mean, if Mark Ingram is to go down for 6 weeks for a high ankle sprain, Gus Edwards could come in and be the bell cow and give you 20 carries, and then you have Dobbins as more of the change of pace. Like, he could be, and he has been, a bell cow in this offense, and he's averaged 5 yards since he's been in the league. So, absolutely, Gus is going to be one of those players that everyone wants late in the draft, because you're right, one injury away from him becoming a consistent red zone threat. I mean, that guy would get how many touchdowns if Ingram was gone for 8 weeks? I mean, he would get a lot of touch just because of the nature of the offense and how often they're in the red zone. So, yeah, Gus Edwards is a perfect late round pick. Although I'll say this, if Dobbins and if Ingram are healthy, then
he's a non-factor.
Or then Edwards would be a relatively non-factor. Yeah, he would.
So you're not taking Justice Hill over Gus Edwards?
Come on, man. Come on, man. Justice Hill better just be feeling lucky if he's on this team.
Oh my gosh, he should be counting his lucky stars. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the other two before we dig into positions and stuff like that. From a fantasy perspective, let's say these Ravens have a rushing pie, and we'll forget Lamar. He's a big factor of that. But as far as the running back room goes, between these two, where's the pie being sliced, right? Like, is it 50% and 50%? You see it breaking down? Is it 70-30? What's your initial thoughts as far as this, as far as production goes?
I think early in the season, you'll see Ingram be the primary ball carrier, certain in high leverage situations, third and short, goal line situations. Ingram will be the primary ball carrier. But if you want to know who I would take between the two for the long haul, I would take Dobbins, no doubt, because I think while Ingram was a good receiving threat, he caught 26 out of 29 targets last year. It was perfectly respectable, better than I think a lot of people will give him credit, because they're used to seeing Kamara catch all the balls in New Orleans. But I just think Dobbins' explosiveness, the youth that he brings, he's 9 years younger. It's just I just think they're going to, by the second half certainly of the season, and by the time you're in your fantasy playoffs, Dobbins will be, to me, the clear-cut leader back in this offense, just because of his versatility. I mean, the guy can do everything that you need, and can do it with home run speed, where Ingram really can't. I mean, Ingram can do it all. He just doesn't have that breakaway, long play speed that Dobbins has. So
now let me ask you this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to say, I think that they will end up with very similar points by the end of the season, because I think Ingram will get more touchdowns, Dobbins will get more catches, and Dobbins might end up with, I think their yards will be very similar. I would be happy with both, but what's your thoughts on them?
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say, and I'll apply this to fantasy here in a second, but one of the things that's incredible to me about Mark that I underrated when he came over was his feet, his ability to get as much out of every play as possible. And that is my very minute, tiny concern about JK, is that he has the breakaway speed and he's shown flashes and things like that. But Mark's feet are of another, like, they're just another level, right? Like, his ability to be inside the tackles and not get tangled up and not get slowed down, move at a good pace forward. JK's got, like you talked about, that breakaway speed. Mm-hmm. But I'm interested to see how Dobbins does, because one of the things at Ohio State that you have to say is pretty true, he didn't get touched very often before he had like a full head of steam.
Right. But that's how it'll be here.
I hope so. I just don't know if it'll.
Look at our offense.
I feel like it looked like that last year a lot of times when Mark had the ball, but that's because he made it look that way based on his maneuverability in close quarters. So that's my only concern. But as far as fantasy goes, I'm really interested in your take. So basically what you're saying is that he might not have as many rushing yards, but his passing production will make up for that. And you'd prefer JK. I think I'm going to ride with the old dog on this.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to ride with, I think I'd take Mark, and I think he has a little bit higher of a grade here than JK. He's what, 58th overall?
Yeah, just slightly. Yep.
And JK's 78th.
And the problem is, because people are probably going to be shocked. They turn this video on, they say, what do you mean? I mean, they just broke the rushing record. How can neither one of these guys be very high? Well, because they take away from one another, unfortunately.
The Lamar factor in the rushing game has to be considered.
Absolutely.
He's our leading rusher.
Yeah, no doubt. And people can say that they expect Lamar to rush less, and that's fine. I could even agree with you, but they can't stop. I shouldn't say they never.
Right.
They won't stop using what makes Lamar great, because his threat to pull it and turn to the outside is what makes those holes. Like you mentioned, Dobbins saw those. Well, because he ran the same offense.
Yeah.
And that offense just leads to players pausing, waiting to see, and then it leads to big wide open holes for guys like Dobbins to run through. So I think both are going to have great years. It's just they're going to take away from one another's value.
What if they're sitting there? What if they're sitting there? Say you pick up Mark and Dobbins is in the next round.
In the very next round, I wouldn't double down.
Would you no scenario where you take them both?
Not back to back. I mean, I would, but I
guess not back to back, but would there be a scenario
Absolutely.
where you take them both?
I think if you could end up, man, just imagine. So that's such a unique team, because there's no team where you would think about starting two backs, but if you had both of them on your team, it would be an interesting call to start them both. I mean, only because the Ravens get like 200 rushing yards a game. So if you're also talking about Dobbins getting a few catches and some receiving yards, him and Ingram, I think that it would be certainly from a flex position, it would make some sense. But I would say for both of these guys, 5 to 6 round would be ideal. Yeah. But if you wanted to get them a little early, look, I understand. I'm a Ravens fan. I know how it is when you see your guys up there. You want to not just root for them on the field, but you want to root for them in your fantasy group too. So if you want to take them in the 4th round, you'd be just fine, because like you mentioned, one injury. Now, what if Ingram were to get hurt? Look at what Dobbins' value would skyrocket at that point. I mean, it would be unbelievable. And he's 31 years old, so it's not like it's unlikely or it's crazy to think he could get hurt. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I agree with you on the round. I think your analysis is correct. I guess my only preference this year would be Ingram. But as far as my heart goes, it's always going to be with Gus. We know, and I would lean towards Dobbins, but that's right. That's our only difference here. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's move along here. Are there any other? I mean, I'm looking down the list here, and this might be comical, but the next person I think worth mentioning, as far as fantasy goes, might be Justin Tucker. Well, Justin Tucker certainly. There's no other offensive players that I can think of that would be worth we can spend some time on them. I think that there's players that just they're more late round type pickups. I mean, James Prochet is getting a lot of love by players or by the media right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to go out and light up the world on the football field, just because we've been hearing so much about how the lack of offseason is affecting rookies. But the projections I'm seeing are frankly insulting. I mean, come on. They're talking about Prochet, the ESPN projections. I'm seeing PFF, and I'm getting nothing showing him more than 100 yards maybe for the whole season. And that's crazy. Yeah, because I honestly think he's going to have more value. Now, his value obviously will increase like every backup if players above them go down. So if Hollywood were to have a groin injury and miss some games, then any of these guys will get thrusted up to the top of the. But honestly, if I had to be honest, even though I'm a Ravens fan, I would not draft any other wide receivers outside of Marquise Brown. Maybe Willie Snead late, maybe, but honestly, I think I would draft Marquise Brown, and that'd probably be it for me. Yeah, no, I'm with you. Now, where are you taking Tucker, man? They have him. Let's see. They have him. What round do they have him projected at? Maybe. No matter. The only reason he's not the number one kicker is because of high-powered offenses that are also indoors is typically the only reason he's not number one. But he's definitely going to be in the top three, no matter what ranking system you're using. He's going to be a top three kicker. I mean, what do you have as far as the rankings?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So, like you said, definitely top three. They have, Tucker as a 14th, 15th rounder, of course. Maybe stay patient on a kicker. But, yeah, they have Lutz and it's Butker, right? Mm-hmm. It's not Bootker, Butker from Kansas City. Now, it's interesting, though.
The Detroit kicker up there, is he up high on your list as well?
He's as far as kickers goes, his rank is 6th. He's the 6th ranked.
Okay. All right, so if it depends on really where you look. If you look at ESPN, they have Tucker as number one. If you look at PFF, they have him actually surprisingly low at number 6. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Which I think of that is not necessarily an insult or a knock on his skill set. It's more so they must have absolutely high hopes for some of these offenses, and I think a lot of it also is Tucker gets a little bit devalued by the fact that the Ravens offense is so good in the red zone. They just don't kick a lot of field goals. I mean, they punch it in, and they give him extra point opportunities where a lot of these guys are getting field goal opportunities. So, what
do you think about this too? I wonder how you can calculate this, but I feel like the Ravens also, when he is kicking a field goal, it's because we're in a very unfavorable position to where, like, other teams, if it's 4th and 3 on the 38.
Good point.
They're probably going to kick it where we're probably going to go for it. And if he does kick it, we're talking about a 51-yarder, 50-plus yarder.
Yeah, but even him, I think he was like 80% from that, right? So he's still incredible.
But his difficulty of each kick is so much higher than other guys based on our offense. Don't you think?
And it's not just the difficulty. I think you touched on the biggest point, and I was missing that, is the fact that they go for it so much more often on 4th down than any other team. If you look at the metrics last year, certainly when they crossed that 50-yard mark, I mean, just look how little Sam Cook punted. And then, it's like they went for it. They had so much confidence. And I heard, I can't remember who said it, but the Ravens lead the league as far as analytics. They analytics drive a lot of their decision-making, whether it's game day, whether it's drafting, free agency, or even coach acquisition. They use analytics. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Tucker is ranked lower than a lot of these guys simply because he doesn't get the opportunities to kick as many field goals as these guys, because we know if opportunity was equal, he would be by far number one on every list. Not just some list, every list. Okay?
It wouldn't even be a question.
When are they taking kickers? Let's help them, because if you remember last year in our league, somebody went out and they grabbed a kicker in like the 5th round.
Yeah, don't be that guy, okay? Please. And don't grab the defense in the 4th.
Yeah, please.
Didn't that same person make consecutive picks, defense, kicker in consecutive rounds? Yeah, so I say round 14, 15. Don't you agree with me?
Yes. I mean, you got to take a kicker late. The difference in scoring between the top and the mediocre is very minimal.
Yeah.
So please, don't take a kicker too early.
Yeah, stay patient. Don't get emotional. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you want to talk about the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, so I don't know if many of you are in individual defensive player leagues, but for those of you who are, I think it's pretty obvious the players that you're going to be attacking. Most individual defensive leagues, they go for the tackle machines. You get a point for most tackles, at least a half point in pretty much every league I've heard. So to me, you got to go. First, you look at the linebackers, and if I'm, I know that he's a rookie. I know that this is a shortened off season. I still think you got to take. Patrick Queen. You got to take Patrick Queen.
AKA
Blueberry Marmalade, right?
That's right.
I think you got to take him. He's a no-brainer. He's going to be getting the lion's share of snaps here in Baltimore. So I think you take him. Now, as far as anyone else, it would be tough. I mean,
Chuck Clark was our leading tackler last year. I mean, obviously you're assuming that's going to change.
No, but I think you're right. I think that's a good – Chuck Clark would be – I don't know about Malik Harrison. I don't think he gets the playing time early on. Now, if like say you had an injury halfway through the season, I would certainly be looking at Malik Harrison as a guy that you could store, because I think by the second half of the season he gets a lot more clock than the first half. But I think you're right. I think the two guys you're looking for is going to be Patrick Queen and Chuck Clark right now. Some people might want to flirt with a Calais Campbell because he did have big years in the past. I just don't know if he gets the tackles to get the value out of him. I would steer clear of anyone else unless there's injuries outside of Patrick Queen and Chuck Clark.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. What about as far as a team, not individual, but as far as team defensive, the outlook on how our team will be as a defense? I figure we should probably talk about that as well. So what's your take on how our defense will be this year in comparison to how we were in the past? I mean, you think it's going to tick up from a fantasy perspective? How do you see that breaking down?
I mean, the Ravens are always going to be pretty good because of the fact that they have a commitment to first of all, the offense helps the defense look a lot better. I mean, when your offense runs as many plays as the Ravens do, it makes your defense's job a lot easier. So they're always going to be in the conversation, and rightfully so. Now, how high up, it's always hard to tell because defenses is the hardest to gain consistency year in and year out because obviously there's a lot of changeover on defense, but the biggest thing is that they don't have the ball, so they can't make a lot of the stuff is dictated to them by the offense. Mm-hmm. And the loss of Earl could impact the field. There's no doubt about that. But I would still consider this Ravens defense, the aggression that they're going to have, the coverage that they have behind that aggression, and then the additions of Calais Campbell, Patrick Queen, Malik Harrison, Derek Wolfe.
Tavon Austin.
Yeah, which is like having another first-round pick, as somebody's mentioned. I think that there's no reason that this defense should be any lower than top 5, and I'm predicting that they're going to be a top 3 defense. I think when you have that much coverage, when a team that's rarely behind, I mean, you got to think the Ravens. If you look at their season last year, to start the game, they were unbelievable. They almost always jumped out into a lead. So when your defense doesn't even they don't know hardly how. I think in the last 5 years, the Ravens have the least plays ran as a defense while trailing in the last 5 years. They just don't get behind a whole bunch. You know what I mean? They just don't. So it helps the defense because now and then the lead gets extended by the offense. Now they have to throw the ball. And the Ravens might have the best individual position group in the entire league if you look at their cornerback room. I mean, they're phenomenal at cornerback. So I can't think of a reason why they'd be worse than 5th, and I honestly expect them to be in the top 3 for sure. And it's honestly they have a very good shot at being the number 1 defense in the league if there's no major injuries.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that that's an astute breakdown by my co-host Glenn Martin. I like it. I think you guys are getting a lot of value out of Glenn right now. Yeah. I think it's great. I tell you what, he helped me a lot last year in my rookie draft as a fantasy player. I think I did pretty decent considering.
Absolutely, yeah.
I agree with you 100% there. I think as far as numbers go, the defense, the offense definitely helps the defense. I think our sack numbers will be up this year. I think our turnover numbers, and we had some great numbers last year, but you're right. There's no reason that they won't be better with the guys that you named. So I wouldn't be nervous about taking the defense. Now, overall, like you said, don't do it early. Now, where do you have? Do you have that in the round breakdown?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be pretty late. It's going to be 11, 12. Yeah. I wouldn't be reaching for any defenses very early. Let me see here if I have it. Do you happen to have
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah. Okay, I have it here. All right, here we go. All right, let's see where they have them. Because I mean, a lot of people want to. It's weird because when you look at when to take a defense, people think you got to get that first one. It's like once that first one goes, it's like boom, boom, boom. They all start dropping. Don't get nervous. Let them go. I mean, what I'm seeing is the Steelers are projected to have the number 1 defense, followed by the Patriots. Which, by the way, the Patriots, they have how many people opting out?
Yeah,
their offense. I mean, people are buying into Cam, but. Anyway, we're not here to talk about. They have the Ravens as the 4th best defense. The projection I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But let's see positional. Let's go to draft board. Okay, here we go. Team defense. All Okay. I don't have any being taken, until the 15th round. So,
Don't
basically,
do it, guys.
Yeah, don't do it too early. At the very earliest, the 13th round to take a defense. At the very earliest. But even then, I don't know. I'm not big on taking defense early because I think you can get a lot out of some bad defenses that ends up being behind. They end up getting a lot of turnovers, a lot of times. So it can be funny with defense. But I would say the absolute highest to take them is 13, 14. But they're going to be good.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. So we're hoping that you guys got some value out of this. I know that I've learned a lot in my first year, just observing what Glenn does in fantasy and trying to learn as much as I can. So hopefully you guys got some good insight. Let us know what you think about some of the rankings that they have as far. The one I'm really intrigued on is your guys' opinion with JK and Mark and the breakdown. That's going to be a really interesting one as far as fantasy goes. So let us know your thoughts. And we will be back soon.
See you.